Hi, I'm Sean Emerson, and welcome to MenLiving's The Big Question. At MenLiving, we're continually looking for ways to create spaces that can lead to more connection, growth, and harmony. With that mission in mind, we will assemble a diverse group of individuals in a virtual space to explore societal big question once every month. Our intention is to offer perspective from different angles, promoting more curiosity and understanding. In this fifth edition, we discuss cultural immersion. Our panelists are Bouey, Erika Martinez, and Sarah-Bess Dworin. We focus on our panelists' personal experiences moving from one culture to another. We explore expanding our horizons by getting outside of what we know and how it changes ourselves. And lastly, we cover travel and its impacts on our people and our planet. Enjoy July's The Big Question.
So welcome, welcome to the latest edition of The Big Question. And so right now you have Bouey and myself, and we may be joined by other panelists later in the session. Today we're talking about cultural immersion. And rather than kind of set up a definition for what that is, Andre, maybe you could start and what comes to mind when you think about cultural immersion?
Well, if I'm being honest with you, I don't really know what that term means. Cultural immersion. So can you give me an example or give me some more details of it? Maybe I can answer your question a little bit fuller.
So the idea is really to exploring places outside of what would be your let's say your home, place that you're comfortable with. So you're going to other places and you're surrounding yourself with the culture and the people of a different place.
Gotcha.
And that could be a different country. It could be a different neighborhood. I'll give you an example to start. So a young man that I met a long time ago, Jamal Cole, started a organization in Chicago called My Block, My Hood, My City. And Jamal brings groups of high schoolers from Inglewood and surrounding neighborhoods on the south side to other neighborhoods in the city of Chicago to explore the food and the business. And he makes the point that kids that grow up in those neighborhoods have never seen the lake, and they're a mile from Lake Michigan. And so what he does as just an example of cultural immersion, he brings them to other neighborhoods and experience all aspect of that neighborhood. So he might take them to Logan Square or Lincoln Park or Streeterville or what have you in the city of Chicago. So people that are listening to this, those are very different neighborhoods than these kids are growing up in. So that's kind of his mission, and that's what he built his nonprofit on.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I think that now that you've kind of broken it down for me, several things come to mind with that. I mean, for me, I would say that maybe 70% of my life is about cultural immersion. You know what I'm saying? Because when I grew up, the first 15 years of my life, I grew up in a place that was essentially 50 miles away from where I was born, right? So all my family was there. The majority of the people that lived there looked like me, but then there were also other cultures there kind of sprinkled in, but those were like the minority, you know what I'm saying? The majority that I saw were people who kind of looked and talked and acted like me. And then by force, I want to make sure I communicate this explicitly. Like by force, I was pushed out of my comfort zone. And as a teenager, as a 15-year-old, it was just devastating for me. It was just I mean, I won't go into all the details about the mental health toll that it took on me, but just taking me out of my comfort zone, it was destructive for me at that time. But essentially I was, put into the total opposite of what I was used to. I was the only one and being the only one of something and having a worldview that nobody really understands and kind of knows about was tough, you know, especially during that time. I think if I would have maybe done that when I was an adult, I would have took it a lot better. But because I was a teenager, still trying to figure out things and, you know, being put out of my side of my comfort zone, which is uncomfortable for anybody, I think, you know, it was really shocking. So that's been my experience. And then, as I sit here now, I look back on that. I'm so grateful for it. You know what I'm saying? And now now I'm a little irritated because a lot of people don't like doing that type of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Everybody wants to be comfortable. And to me, I have zero sympathy for people who want comfort, you know, especially when it comes to that subject, because on a day-to-day basis, I'm around people who have a different worldview, different politics, look different than me. And it's sort of like a superpower now. Like now it's not a situation where I feel uncomfortable and I kind of embrace that, you know. But it's opened a lot of doors for me and it's opened a lot of different worlds for me that I probably wouldn't have even explored if I was still stuck in that same environment that I grew up in. You know what I mean?
Do you have a feeling for when you made the turn from where it was very difficult, where you were, as you say, when you were forced into this different culture than what you had in the first 15 years of your life? And you know, you've talked about it here before on other episodes about kind of how you went through the process and the difficulty of it. But when you started to make the turn to realize that, wait, this might be good for me, I mean, from a growth perspective, and maybe it was 2 years ago, I don't know. I mean, do you have a sense for that?
Yeah, it wasn't 2 years ago, but I would say it was fairly recent, and it's something that it didn't really just click just like that, but it's been a process, and I would say that the process had completed itself for me maybe anywhere between 10 to 5 years ago.
Okay.
So in between 2012 and 2017, it had finally clicked for me in a way where I said, okay, you know what? This was a good thing. You know, this has opened a lot of doors for me. But I fought it the whole way. You know what I'm saying? Like from the time I think I left Detroit in 1999. I fought it from 1999 until well into 2012, maybe even past that, you know. And I think what helped me transition out of that was, I think, other changes that occurred, because that wasn't the only change that's happened to me in my life. That was just one of the biggest ones. But you know, as you live, your life just changes. Things change. People come in your life. People leave your life permanently. You know, a lot of different things happen, and then you just have to adjust to that, to that being uncomfortable with that person either coming in or that person leaving. You know what I'm saying? So I think that around that time, that's probably when it clicked for me.
Did you find yourself, as you again were forced into this different culture, feeling like you had to adopt aspects of that culture that weren't you, or that you were drawn to, that you begin to adopt, that became part of you?
Yeah, I would say that, yes. I would say that I have adopted aspects of that culture. I think some of it was good. It was good that I adopted some of those aspects of the new culture that I experienced. For example, I'll give you an example. When I moved to Chicago, it was my first experience being around anybody. Oh, just in time. Miss Martinez is on there. Hey, Miss Martinez, how you doing?
Hi, Erika.
Hi, I'm sorry
Hi.
I'm late to the party.
That's okay. That's okay. But what I was saying, Sean, is that when I moved here to Chicago, it was my first introduction to Mexican Americans. We didn't have Mexicans in Detroit. At least, well, if we had them in Detroit, I wasn't around them. So and the reason that I even decided to be around Mexicans was because there wasn't enough Black people. And so those were the next best people that were like considered minorities. You know, those were they kind of understood a little bit of what I was going through. So and white folks, they didn't like my white friends didn't invite me to their houses or anything like that. Their parents didn't invite me to their houses like I was used to, you know, living back in Detroit. And my Mexican friends' parents would invite me over and invite my families over and stuff like that. So I got to know that culture a little bit better. And what I found is that in the Mexican culture, from what I observed, is that it's very family oriented. The people that I knew were very family oriented, much more than what I was ever used to. It's just how they interacted with their family was totally different from what I was ever accustomed to. And so I loved that and I adopted that. You know, so that's an example that you would say that I saw that and I was like, okay, I'm gonna pull from that because if I have a family somewhere down the line, I want my family to mimic the importance of family because I saw what that did for those individuals, particularly like my friends that were Mexican. Now, the things that I adopted that I feel like I shouldn't adopt it is just this whole the dominant culture's response to conflict. So my white friends and even the people that I'm really close with that are white, like they didn't like conflict. And they wanted me to not like conflict and they wanted me to not address conflict. And at first I tried to do that because I didn't want to be the only one just causing conflict and everybody just kind of avoiding it, kind of dodging it. But then I found out that that's not who I am. You know what I'm saying? Like I am just super comfortable in conflict. And so that would be an example of something that the environment wanted me to adopt, but I just kind of fall back at that because I was just so used to it in the first 15 years of my life, just being around the people that I was around.
So Erika, what we're talking about is cultural immersion. And Andre was relaying moving from one culture from Detroit to Plainfield, right? Is that where where he settled in Plainfield? And just the difference in the different cultures and the difficulty that he had settling in, and then and you're coming in as he's kind of talking about adopting kind of new aspects of the culture that he's a part of. Did you have any of those similar experiences?
I did actually. I moved to the United States when I was about 12 years old. And so I had to basically learn the new language, learn a little bit about the American culture. And it was like for sure a cultural shock. Not just because of, because everything was pretty much new, but it was very, very much different than where, I had lived before. Obviously I was like not, so I lived in Mexico City. And so it was, I thought it was like, I was very aware of the different cultures that we had. But when I moved here, it was like pretty much, very much different. Because believe it or not, it was kind of like, even though we have a Mexican, we have a large Mexican population here in the United States, it was very different too. Because, I guess, a lot of people see Mexicans and they think that right away we're like, like the typical that we wear the cowboy hats and the cowboy boots and, and that's really not what the Mexican culture is. So I think that was something that I always kind of struggle with. It was just the the stereotypes that they had, you know, when it came to the Mexican culture. And so yeah, it was for sure, it was an experience, you know, to learn and what it was, the American culture, you know, because as you know, what Andre was mentioning. Sorry, can you hold on for 1 second?
Mm-hmm. So remind me again, did you guys know each other growing up or just from school?
Sorry, my dog was like
no,
barking.
we met each other, what, 4 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yes, 4 years ago.
2019, when I
Okay.
became employed at Joliet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry. So what you know, it's interesting what Andre was saying about how when he moved here, you know, it was he kind of started hanging out with Mexicans, and I think it was just like the same thing. I felt like our city was very segregated. I mean, I moved to Chicago, so that was I lived in Little Village. So
Okay.
it was like, you know, Little Village, if, you know, for those of you who don't know, it's a little bit of, it's a neighborhood, and predominantly Mexicans live there. And so it's like almost kind of like a little, it's called Little Village because literally it's like a small town of Mexico. Because everything you go there, there's like stores and restaurants, and obviously everybody speaks Spanish. And so the neighborhood kind of reflects of what a little bit of a town in Mexico. And so yeah, so the city is very segregated, and so you don't really get to experience a lot of cultures, you know, once, even when you move to the city. So as I started kind of growing up, then I started meeting people from, you know, all over the world. And so then I started to kind of learn more about what the American culture was. And it's kind of seemed like the American culture is just more of like all of us, you know, just little immigrants coming from different places, and then just bringing their traditions and kind of you know, their cultures, and then that's kind of like what became the American culture in a way. So that was my experience as emerging into another culture.
So Andre comes from one city to another, and Andre basically a black culture in Detroit, and to a Mexican and white culture in Plainfield, Illinois. And Erika, you come from Mexico City and you moved to the city of Chicago. I'm curious, when you go back to your old cultures, I'm assuming you do that, both of you, over time. Comfortable to go back, uncomfortable to go back? What do you I mean, so you leave and it's uncomfortable, and then over periods of years you go back and forth between the two, and what's that like for each of you?
You know, that's interesting to ask that question, because for me it was it's been a struggle. Because I go back to my roots, right? Because, but then you kind of start feeling, you know, I've moved since I was 12. I'm not ashamed to say that I'm 45. So I have lived here more than I lived in Mexico now. And so it almost feels like now I'm also part of being American. So now I kind of say I'm Mexican American, even though I wasn't born here, but because I feel that I do feel American now. You know, I have my kids were born here. Now I you know, I've done my career here, everything. And so when I go back, I do feel like I also don't belong in Mexico, because now, like, I have they kind of say like you have been tinted with like the American culture now. You know, now like I don't speak like the proper Spanish, and I don't dress the way, I don't know even what that means, but it's just like, it feels like they feel like I have now somehow now I'm kind of split. And so then it has been a struggle, because now I feel like I'm not Mexican enough, but I'm also not American enough. So it's always like, where do I belong? And there's the saying in Spanish that you're not from here nor from there, because you kind of feel that way. It almost feels like you don't belong. It's like you're like almost in the middle. It's like, well, I'm Mexican, but now Mexico doesn't like treat me as Mexican, but then I'm in America and they don't treat me as American. So then where do I belong? So that has been a struggle for me for years.
Do you travel? How often do you travel back to Mexico?
I mean, I try to go as often as I can, because I also kind of wanted my daughters, now that I have children, I have two daughters, I wanted them to learn the culture. I wanted them to know where I came from, where my parents came from, their ancestors, their grandparents, their dad. So we try to go as often as we can. So we try to go like maybe every year, every 2 years in a way. So
yeah. And do you get a sense? How old are you girls?
One is 15 and the other one is 19.
And do they have that same sense that you do of where they fit, or do they feel like, okay, we're Americans?
I think they feel more Americans than I think especially my youngest one, because she kind of grew up more of like learning or speaking English. And I mean, obviously we still do a lot of the Mexican traditions. She just had a quinceañera, like turning 15 a couple of weeks ago. So we still kind of try to, have those rituals and in our culture that we have. And so I try to, as much as I can for them to learn. But I think that my kids feel American for the most part. Yes.
Yeah. Andre, how about you going back to Detroit over the years?
Yeah, I would say that my situation probably mirrors Erika's almost to a T, Just like her, I've lived here in Chicago, in the Chicagoland area longer than I lived in Detroit. So I consider myself, I'm proud of being in Chicago. I like Chicago. I like the people here. I think it's mainly because of the people that are here, really. It's not really the region. It's just the people that I've gotten to know since I moved here in 1999. I'm attached to those people. And throughout the years, I've become a little bit more distant, not to everybody, but to the people that lived in Detroit. A lot of those people have moved on to even other cities. There's still a good core there in Detroit. But I think when I went, so there was one year I went back to Detroit, and in Detroit there's a restaurant. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it. It's called Coney Island, and it's really they're like chain restaurants. They're all over the place. They're Coney Island restaurants. They serve Coney Island hot dogs, chili dogs. They serve all chicken, all types of stuff, right? So I went to a Coney Island that was probably a mile from where I used to live. And I was there by myself. I think I was waiting for a friend. And the guy that was there at the restaurant came up to me and he looked at me like straight on in my head. It's like, man, you're not from around here, are you? And I was just like, wow, like it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, man, like I've probably been in that city longer than that kid has been alive, but he could just look at me and tell that I just wasn't a product of that environment anymore. And he was right. I mean, because I have been consciously and unconsciously influenced by my new environment and the people that I've been around and just getting older and things of that nature. So just like Erika, I feel like I'm on the island, you know what I'm saying? And I don't like that. I want to be connected. I just got done telling you about family and how I enjoy having a family and being connected with a family. Because of my moving situations and things that have happened, I feel kind of disjointed from both groups. I'm not technically a Chicagoan. I'm not really, never really lived in Chicago. I'm kind of like an outskirts of Chicago type of person. Not really from Detroit anymore, you know what I'm saying? And even then I was living right outside of Detroit, so I don't really connect to those people anymore. So I'm kind of just like my own oddity, which, for the last few years, it's felt uncomfortable. But this summer, even, I've just been thinking about that and how that just kind of makes me special as a human being. And there's a lot of different things that make us all special, but that's one of the things that just kind of makes me special. And it gives me a perspective that a lot of different other people can't have because they haven't lived that experience before.
Do you hold on to each of you? I mean, you mentioned your daughter just went through her, I'm not going to pronounce it right.
Quinceañera.
Thank you. Which is holding on to those cultural aspects of where you've come from. And I'm curious, Andre, do you hold on to anything cultural like that from Detroit that you still practice or that you would consider part of your roots? Like I'm still, I originally grew up outside of Boston, and so I'm still, a Boston fan. I'm not sure that's a cultural thing, but I mean, it's something that I continue to carry on with me.
I'll answer that question. I would say yes and no. I mean, I think a lot of it I've kind of let go of. But I have held on to a lot of different things. For example, the same example you used about the sports team. I'm still a Detroit fan of everything, even though the majority of the times they suck. You know what I'm saying? They're still. I'm not a fan because they're good. I'm a fan because that was where I was from. And I think being from Detroit has a historical significance for me that I want my kids to know about, at least my son to know about, because of why we ended up in Detroit. And so my grandparents were all born, and they were born and raised in the South. Mm-hmm. All of them were born in the South, and they all made their way up to Detroit. And there's a historical significance behind why all four of them ended up in Detroit. And that's where my parents were born. And that opportunity in Detroit allowed them to do certain things that a lot of African-American families weren't able to do because of the car industry and the opportunities that were afforded, even though it wasn't paradise. It was still an opportunity that allowed me to be where I am today. And so I think it's important that my children know kind of where, to give them some context on how they ended up where they ended up based on a couple of generations ago, decisions that were hard decisions that were made that allowed them to come from the South up to Detroit, and why they particularly settled in that city and not other cities.
You said your kids, but you only have one. Now you only have one. You're not revealing any information right now, are you?
Right. No,
because
no, just one kid right now.
Right.
Yeah, my children, my maybe future children. Depends how good. Depends how good my son acts up in the next 2 years.
So I'm curious. Erika, I know that Andre and Brittany were just in the Bahamas. I was actually overseas recently in Europe. I don't know if you've traveled anywhere in the near past that's not Mexico, that's somewhere else. And I'm just curious how you two feel about going to a different culture that's outside of America or Mexico or Detroit, and how you feel when you go to those places, and do you try to immerse yourself in the culture that is there? Are you uncomfortable? Are you very comfortable?
I mean, honestly, so I went to Europe a month ago. And so I went to Italy and Amsterdam, and this is my first time traveling to Europe. So I don't really have a lot to compare it, but I did try to emerge in the culture. I was telling Andre that I mean, obviously when I went to Italy, I tried to at least learn a couple of phrases, you know, in Italian. And I feel that Italian and Spanish are kind of similar.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt very comfortable with the language, you know, as far as like communicating. I definitely try before going there, like I try to do a lot of research in regards to their culture and their traditions and maybe some of their like rules and things like that. But for the most part, I feel very, very comfortable going to, you know, both countries, like the Netherlands and in Italy. They were, I mean, people, the locals, they were extremely nice. I try to eat as much as food as I could, honestly, like every day. And it's just respecting, you know, like how the rule was, you know, like I mean, they didn't really have a lot of rules that I can think of, but at least, like, for example, like in Italy, especially in Rome, they dress very conservative. And so I try to do that as well. Like I was in like really, even though it was like super hot, like I was trying to like not be so flashy with my clothes and things like that, you know. And so I kind of tried to respect some of that. And in the Netherlands, it was like very much different. Amsterdam, I don't know if you've ever been to Amsterdam, but over there, everyone was just so chill. And I think it has to be the fact that everyone's always happy because they're high all the time. So so I think that it was again just like the culture shock, how everyone was so chill. I mean, literally you would have people smoking weed right next to, you know, when you're eating in a restaurant. And so I mean, there were families there with their kids and stuff. And my husband, my partner and I, we kind of had this conversation about like the I guess the families that go there, it's like they understand that is how the culture is. And so they're respecting that, you know, they're not complaining as far as like, oh my God, you need to go away, like go sneak weed over there, you know, so my children are not, or even like the whole thing about like drinking, you know, it's like literally it's like 9 o'clock and everybody's like already having a beer and stuff. Or like even walking through the red light district, you know, things like that. So I think that families that go there, they go with like an open-minded and knowing like, this is what their culture is and we're going to respect that. So
did that make you uncomfortable, that
not
aspects
at
of the
all.
culture?
Not at all. No. And again, because I was like kind of already going with that information, and so I knew that I was kind of expecting that. So I went in there knowing that, okay, this is what they do and I'm going to respect that.
Yeah, I have to tell you, so I was just in Italy as well, and I been there before. I actually do have a little bit of uncomfortableness in not being able to speak the language very well, and I kind of have I kind of have this thing that, yeah, a view that Americans go to different countries and expect certain things, and I don't want to be that. And so I'm very kind of conscious and very aware of the fact that I am the visitor to your country. And I want to be accommodating of that, rather than the other way around. You know, do you know what I mean? I mean,
Yes,
it's just,
absolutely. Yeah, because I was thinking the same way. And so that's the reason why I kind of like, and again, I don't speak Italian at all. But I try to learn is just little phrases where, you know, I would go to the restaurant and ask for like certain things. You know, but I think that because they're so I don't know how your experience has been, but I feel like they're so open to people speaking different languages that they even if you're just speak English, they're okay with that. Like as long as you, I don't know, I felt like as long as you try to say certain things and like you said, not really expecting, they're like, okay, I'm a visitor here, so I'm respecting you for that. I think that they understand that, and so they would meet you halfway. You know,
Yeah.
they were speaking English, because everywhere we went, they spoke English.
Yeah.
But you know, I tried to. They honestly would ask us, like, if we spoke Spanish, and we would say, yeah, we speak Spanish. So they kind of preferred for us to speak Spanish, because like I said, maybe because Italian is similar to Spanish, that they feel more comfortable talking in Spanish. And I mean, honestly, I would understand maybe half of what they were telling me. Just like I would pick little phrases here and there where I could understand what they were telling me.
Andre, what about going to the Bahamas? Are you comfortable in the Bahamas?
Oh yeah, definitely comfortable in the Bahamas. Cause I'm not going. I mean, the Bahamas is very touristy. You know what I'm saying? It has a section where people go there from, you know, they're on cruise ships and stuff like that. Then they have their actual tourist attractions there on the island, Atlantis and Balmar. I think it's Balmar. I think it's called Bahamar, which is a new attraction. But I'm in the grit of Bahamas when I'm going there. I'm in with the commoners, you know, both on the good side and the not so good side. And I feel comfortable going there just because I'm there with my wife, who spent most of her summers there. My mother-in-law, who grew up there, I think she was born and raised there. She moved to the United States when she was 18. Because I'm with people that know the island pretty well, I mean, I feel comfortable there. But my wife, I think, is the person that has more of that world knowledge than even I do. She doesn't speak any other languages, but she's been to all types of places. She's been to Europe. She's been to other Caribbean islands and done missions trips and things of that nature. So she's kind of forced me to kind of step outside my comfort zone and say, hey, listen, it's not that bad. They have some good food there. Let's try this out, you know? And in fact, she convinced me to go to Montreal, which is kind of like a Europe in North America, because they speak French, and they do speak English, but they prefer French. And so we can drive there, and we're driving, and all the street signs are in French, and we both don't speak any French. So it's very eye-opening to be in a place like that. But I probably would have never done that if she didn't force me to do it, and if I wasn't forced to be in other uncomfortable situations and them turning out being well. You know, at the back end of those uncomfortable situations, I think you really appreciate the experience. But going through it sometimes, or maybe anticipate that, you get kind of scared. You let the fear take over. So now, you know, I'm open to whatever. Let's go to China. Let's go to Europe. You know what I'm saying? I'm open to it. Whereas 10 years ago, I wouldn't even have dreamed to do something like that. I didn't even have a passport 10 years ago. You know, my wife forced me to get a passport. We were like, we're getting you a passport. And so I said, okay, well, you know, let's make it happen. Now I want to use it. I want to fill out the book, you know?
So you were comfortable in Montreal?
No, I was not.
Oh, you were not?
In Montreal. I was not comfortable. I mean, I got eventually comfortable with there, you know, towards the end of it and when I left, but I wasn't comfortable with there, particularly because of all the street signs were in French. So I couldn't, I didn't know exactly where I was going, you know? The good thing, the one thing that made me comfortable was the fact that the people there speak both languages. They speak both English and French. So they would come up to you and they would start speaking French. And then I would say, you know, stupid American. And then, oh, yeah. And then they just start talking to me in English. You know what I'm saying? So you could tell off the bat that they prefer French. But if someone comes and they're talking and they obviously only speak English, then they'll go ahead and they'll speak English to you. What's up, S. Bizzo?
Hey.
What's up, everybody? Sorry for crashing the party, but I'm glad to see your faces.
No problem. Crash away.
So wait, you know Erika too, right?
Oh, yes.
Oh, all right.
John, thanks for collecting all of my favorite people in one place.
So so you're going to jump right in. So what we've been talking about is cultural immersion.
That was my dive.
And basically the stories that we've been focusing on are Andre's moved from Detroit to Plainfield, Illinois, and kind of the cultural experiences he's had. Erika's moved from Mexico to Chicago. And I think you bring a unique aspect to this discussion too, when we talk about different
Just
cultures.
a white lady grew up here.
Just a Jewish white lady who is kind of balancing between different cultures as well, right? I mean, do you want to kind of talk about that?
Well, I think when I saw your list of questions, the first thing that came to mind was were some of my travel experiences.
Okay.
And that's less about that's a lot about cultural immersion, because I was fortunate to be able to travel for extended periods of time in different places that were very, very different from the culture that I was raised in. And it was absolutely nothing short of transformational in my life. And there's rarely a day that goes by that I don't think about my times somewhere else. And I think that's because I love it as a counterpoint to getting stuck and seeped in this and only this reality. Mm-hmm. And so my mantra is, when I think about those experiences traveling, especially to India, is I say in my mind, it could be otherwise. It could be otherwise. It could be otherwise. In other words, the way that we do things here is a very culturally specific way. It's not that great most of the time, and it could be otherwise. And in fact, other cultures have figured out a lot of other ways of doing things. We get in this rut of being this giant country and thinking that this is the way. It's just a way. And it's been so refreshing to me every time I hold on to that idea, and like I feel it in my bones, and there are memories of times that I hold with me to remind me that that is true, that there are other things going on in other parts of the world at every second that that are really different, and that's valuable to me.
So do you look at those opportunities to go do that as kind of a cleansing? I mean, in the sense of, okay, I'm living this life day after day after day after day, and I have to go do something different in order to, as you say, kind of get out of the route and experience something new, to cleanse, to get back in with a new energy.
Yeah, for sure. It's a perspective reboot. It's also a helpful reality check for me, not to get too stuck and almost fossilized in the rut of doing things a certain way, which I think is the challenge that everyone faces as we age. And travel has a real way of, moving us out of that world. Some of us don't need to travel because we are, walking cultural, we have these multiple cultures in our bodies and in our lives and in our life experience. And so mine has really largely come from travel. And I also do feel in a lot of ways that the particular, religious and cultural social identity that I have makes me feel inside as a bit of an outsider in most settings, but that's not noticeable because I'm white presenting. And so, both are, as you say, perspective shifting.
I think I can say both Andre and Erika talked about kind of being in the middle as well. Like, where do they belong? I mean, culturally, as they move from one culture to another, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Any of those same Erika and Andre, any of those same feelings that SB had about going to these other places? I mean, Erika, you were just in Amsterdam and Italy. Did you feel like, now that you've been back, that it was a cleansing for you, or it helped you to look at your daily life in a different way?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, just what SB was saying as far as like, feeling like this is not the only perspective, I felt that way too. Like it kind of gave me the sense of, okay, the world is very much different. It's not just like in America it's this way. And so, but it gave me kind of hope to know that the world has other perspectives and it's not just like how Americans think, and I guess because I'm always surrounded by just listening to what's going on here and to the people here and everything, even though now we have, access to the world in our hands, but it's not the same to be there as to just listen to and hear. So it was great. And I mean, I wish that more people could do that, travel and just experience that, because I feel like I learned so much more than what I can learn in a book. Like just from learning, just from talking to the locals and learning about their stories, like I thought that I knew about so much about, like the Romans and their history and stuff. I knew nothing. I knew nothing about their culture and how it was. And so it just visiting and just kind of learning and just talking and eating the food, it was just an amazing experience that I don't think I can describe it. It's like you have to experience it. That's one of those things where you have to go and you have to experience that yourself. So I mean, honestly, I wish that everyone had the opportunity to do that. That was another thing that I don't know. I kept thinking about, like, why does it have to be, only the privileged that can travel? So I had a hard time with that. I really did. And that's something that I talked to Andre about, that the first couple of days I felt guilty about being there. And I felt, why me? Why am I so special? And so I kind of had to like pull myself together and say, well, I work really hard. I feel like I earned it. No one paid for this trip. I paid for it myself. And so then that's how I started kind of to feel more into like, okay, I can enjoy this. But I feel guilty for a couple of days because I just feel like maybe I don't belong here. So I don't know. It was just, it's weird to describe it, but I think that everyone should be able to experience that.
I want to pick up on that that kind of feeling of guilt. Mine comes from an environmental concern. I think I agree. It's so perspective shifting, and I think that people who travel have all kinds of ways of cross-pollinating ideas within their own culture that improve it. That's why I believe in it, that a diverse society is healthier. And what we also know is that international air travel is the single largest pollutant to which the common folk are contributing to. And not taking an international trip is the single biggest thing that a person can do to reduce their carbon footprint. Forget about steak. And so I think about that every time I think about how it's accrued to all the benefits in my life. So that's really alive for me, is that it is a privilege and it is an environmental catastrophe, globally speaking. And, on the other hand, the capacity to move in that way is not only for the privilege, it's also for the other end of the continuum. It's for the refugees. And I think a lot about my grandfather, who, his first act getting off the boat from Russia to Cuba was to get a giant, plate of rice and beans because he hadn't eaten, his entire life. So I could be on that end of the travel spectrum. Anyway, I share your guilt for many reasons.
Yeah, now I'm feeling guilty too. Thanks,
Good, I'm
SB.
so glad that the Jewish lady showed up to make everyone feel guilty about this.
Well, I don't feel guilty yet. I haven't been to Europe yet, so I don't feel guilty. I was saying. You know, I mean, I think both of you guys have touched on something that are really good points, and I won't reiterate those things. But when I was talking to Erika, it kind of just makes me feel like, you know, that perspective leads me to the fact that here in America, we think we have it all figured out because we've mastered a capitalist game. You know what I'm saying? So we've amassed all of this fortune here in this one country. I think I forgot what the numbers are. 70% of the world's resources we own. You know, we have taken up 70% of the world's resources, which leaves roughly 30% to the rest of the world, right? And but at the same time, because we've done that, we feel like we have it all figured out. And I would say that the perspectives that I've gotten from people who are not from the United States of America is that we're essentially teenagers here. We think we're adults, but we're really not adults yet, and we want to be adults, but we're not quite there yet. We haven't quite matured to the point where we can actually be called adults, where there's other cultures there that maybe haven't amassed as much capital, but the people there live better lives because they've learned through essentially what we are currently going through right now. So maybe in 100 years when we're all gone, our kids and our grandkids will figure out how to live a better life. But right now, I think we're just kind of living in a teenage world right now. I mean, if you're asking my opinion about that. But yeah, I had another point to make, but I forgot what that was. But I really appreciate it. Oh, it was about the traveling and the guilt thing. I think that, you know, my experience of working in Joliet with those kids, Sean, you brought this up with those kids in Chicago who live a mile away from the lake, but have never gone there. I don't think, you know, we need to go to Europe to get that different perspective. Like when I moved from Detroit to Chicago, that was a huge perceptive switch on my end. And that's 6 hours away in the car, you know what I'm saying? So I don't think that you necessarily have to travel overseas to get a different perspective. You can travel to different parts of this country and still get a different perspective. And the good thing about our country is that there's so many different types of people here that you can literally in Chicago go a mile away and be with a person that's had a totally different experience than you. And I think that we need to utilize that, you know what I'm saying? And one of my goals of some of my kids in my school is to get them out of their own perspective. There's bigger things out there in the world, just what you see in Joliet. And we can go there without necessarily having to amass a fortune to do that.
Yes, I'll just build off of that and say that I was at Lake Michigan this evening, and I found it remarkable to hear so many different languages spoken, you know, in one little patch of Lake Michigan. And you're right. I think that if we really look at the people around us, we see, you know, how we can learn about the world without traveling at all. I know I've learned a lot from the people in this room.
So any last thoughts on the subject before we close it out?
Thanks for letting me crash at the end.
I was keeping the room open in the hopes that you would show, so we could see your face and you could come in and make us feel guilty. So thank you. Thank you.
No problem. That's what I'm here for.
You're like the closer. SB, you like the closer. You came in and
that's
closed
me.
Up. That's what's up. That's what's up.
Like the countertop.
So any last, you know, from each of you, any last thoughts for folks that might watch this about, you know, tips or feelings about immersing yourself in culture and the value of doing that? of other cultures and the value in doing that?
That question does leave me in one thought. And this comes from a travel experience. One of my first as an adult, if we can call a college student an adult, and this was to Northern Ireland. It was my first foray into conflict resolution work and restorative work at a conflict mediation center on the coast of Northern Ireland, the view of Scotland, the cliffs, the green cliffs and the ocean and all the rest of it. And it was a respite center for folks who were experiencing, heavy violence in the cities, in a way, an opportunity to kind of put down their partisan perspectives and guns and come and be healed in a beautiful place. And one of the things that I learned there that really surprised me from a peace worker who had done work in South Africa, Middle East, other places, was knowing when certain folks were not ready to come together with someone who was different from them. And this person was saying that actually what's most important to get to peace and to be able to learn about other cultures is to be very, very well steeped in one's own identity and to be really thoughtful and reflective and celebratory of one's own cultural traditions. And if a person hasn't really done that well, this was in the Northern Irish context of Protestants and the Catholics, one loses oneself in the attempt to bridge the cultural divide. And that's always stuck with me, and the importance of being really firmly rooted and grounded as our branches reach out to others. So that's something that popped into my mind as you asked that question, John.
Great point. Great point. Andre, Erika?
How do you even, what else do you say after that?
Right.
She's always so good about just finishing up, whatever's going on. So, I mean, I don't know. I still think that and I know, thanks as being now I'm thinking like, damn, you're right. Like all that, diesel that they had to use in the plane and all the time or whatever. But
yeah. That's what I'm going to bed with too. Yeah.
Exactly. But just something about being in a different country, it's so different than even if you're just going to the north side, because obviously I can go to Little Italy and maybe experience the culture there, but going to the country and learning and talking to the natives and just learning about more how they live and actually experiencing it, it's just something different that even like books can give you. And even when you're talking to people here, like I can tell you how Mexico is. I can tell you the food and the beach and the traditions, but it's not going to be the same until you actually go to Mexico and you experience it and you talk to the locals and you have the authentic food. Then you'll know, then you'll be able to like, oh my God, Erika told me about these flavors of the tacos and eating the salsa and putting the lime first and how it works. And then you know exactly what it feels like. I just still think that going there, it's not the same as just talking to someone here and just maybe going to another state. You actually have to be there to know what it feels like. So seriously.
She's using all the diesel up right over the Atlantic. I might go in a little different direction here, just because it's just on my heart. But I've been thinking about this whole thing about talking about race in schools and how that's been this huge pushback. And I just became very curious on essentially why this has become a really big thing. And what I've come up with so far is just that essentially our history makes us uncomfortable. Our true history makes us uncomfortable. And really what I've just been pushing myself to do, because just like what I think SB said, understand it's not about necessarily understanding other people. You have to understand yourself first to even get to that point. I just have to consistently try to push myself in a way where I'm uncomfortable. That's the only way that I'm going to grow. I am not going to grow if I just sit in my own box day in, day out and fossilize myself, using your words, SB, into what I want to do, and it's so hard to do that because, I want to be comfortable. I want to be in my air conditioning, using up all of the world's resources, doing what it is that I want to do. It's very natural as human beings to be comfortable, but you can't grow being comfortable. You have to be uncomfortable. And I think that the reason why we have some of the strife that we even have in our own country and we can't figure it out is because the majority of us here do not want to be uncomfortable. And it's not just one set of people, and it's not just one demographic. It's all of us. You know what I'm saying? And I would say that when you talk to people who don't want to be uncomfortable, you can tell that that's the situation because they don't really know the other side of the situation, and I know SB, she put in there, it's white folks, but trust me, I'm around a lot of people of color too, and they're the same way. You know what I'm saying? There are a lot of people that just don't want to be uncomfortable, and it's including white folks. I mean, we're not going to give them a pass as well, but it's my people, it's me. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's certain perspectives that I just avoid even listening to because it makes me uncomfortable, and so I want to put myself in a box as well. So I can't sit here even to say that I'm some person that's above that situation. But and without this turning into a preaching session, I just think that if each of us just found a way to think about one way to make our own selves uncomfortable just for 5 minutes, I think that we would be in a better position as a group of individuals here in this country. I mean, because whether we like each other or not, I mean, we have to learn how to live together. You know what I'm saying? We don't figure that out, it's going to be consequences for everybody, not just one set of people, for everybody. You know what I'm saying? And I think part of the missing key of that is just being in a position to where we can see a different perspective that may make us uncomfortable in addressing that within ourselves. So I think that's where I want to leave everybody with who's listening to this.
Okay, so I'm gonna just take one other cut on that before we go, because the other thing I know about you is uncomfortable is one thing, curious is another thing. And I think, if we can at minimum be curious about others, then that can get us a long way. I mean, so if that curiosity can drive us to be comfortable or uncomfortable, I mean, for me, some of the greatest cultural experiences I've had is going down to the South Side and being in those cultures. And I mean, the learning, I mean, just the interest in how other people are living their lives, and what's happening to them as individuals, I think can be so powerful. And so is that uncomfortable? Yeah, there's uncomfortable aspects of it, but the curiosity, the interest in wanting to engage, and I think that's what's so powerful about going to other cultures and cultural immersion is the curiosity and the enrichment in one's life. Is just, I mean, it just makes life that much better, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
I want to go to Appalachia. You know what I'm saying? In my mind, I have these stereotypes about what's going on in West Virginia. You know what I'm saying? I've never been to West Virginia, by the way. I've never even really spoke to anybody from West Virginia, but I have an opinion about what's going on in West Virginia, but I've never been there before. So So am I curious about it? I mean, I would say yes, no, you know what I'm saying? But I'm more curious about what I can learn from my own ignorance. You know
Andre,
what I'm
going to call you a cultural stereotypes tourist. You like busting stereotypes while taking vacation.
Yes. I want to do my Catholic friends have taught me that. And again, another group of people that I had these stereotypes about that I submerged myself into, and I was like, oh, these people aren't all what they were saying on TV. You know what I'm saying? My Catholic friends they forced me to go in these types of environments, and I'm open to I'm like, wow, this is just so amazing. You know what I'm saying? And it was uncomfortable. And I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily know if I was necessarily curious, because I was kind of forced to do a lot of these things. But when I did it, like, I came out of it so much more of a better person, you know. But I know I'm ignorant about some stuff, so I got to throw myself on these uncomfortable things, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know. That's just my thought.
Love it.
Anyone
Sean,
else?
You want to go with me? Sean, you want to go with me? Are we going to West Virginia?
Whatever you want. Starsky and Hutch, or what? I don't know. I don't know why that came up.
All right.
It's like a very interesting version of Thelma and Louise in my imagination.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks everyone. Always good. Always good to see you. And appreciate all the comments. And we'll be together again in a month, I hope. So, peace and love to you all. Thanks.
Good to see you guys. Have a good night, everyone.
See you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.